Many of us know the name Madam C.J. Walker. She is recorded as the first woman to become a self-made millionaire in America in the Guinness Book of World Records, and according to some sources, she is the first Black American self-made millionaire ever, man or woman. She earned her massive fortune by becoming a mogul in the Black haircare industry. Much talk has surrounded her fortune and her life that ended too soon because of her hypertension. So, what happened with all of that wealth that she left behind? Well, in addition to leaving behind that wealth, she left behind a daughter. And upon Madam C.J. Walker's death, her daughter, A'Lelia Walker, took over the reins of a sizable piece of what her mother had left behind. The money, the business, the upscale brownstones in Harlem, and the mansion on the Hudson River. By the time A'Lelia died, most of what her mother had built and earned was gone. Many writers who have looked into A'Lelia's life say that her mother's money was squandered away, with A'Lelia at the helm of the family business because she was just a party girl who was more interested in throwing extravagant parties than running the business and other affairs that her mother had left behind. And not many writings about A'Lelia counter that narrative. Was she really just a spoiled rich girl who didn't care about what her mother had built for her? Or were there other factors at play regarding the huge financial loss that she took at the end of her life? Let's get into it. But first, if you like these videos about the most scandalous people from yesteryear that make the Hot Mess History channel a time capsule for the culture, subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can know every time that I upload one of these videos or every time that I live stream. Now, on to why you are here. When Madam C.J. Walker died in 1919, her business and personal assets were worth $1 million. Let's say that we're talking only $1 million exactly in 1919. That has the buying power of $16.4 million today in 2022. And a lot of things can be done with that. Madam C.J. Walker's will made sure that a lot was done with her money. As you can see from this June 14th, 1919 edition of the New York Age, Madam C.J. Walker left money to several people and organizations. Some received one-time lump sums, and others received monthly payments for life. But the biggest part of her fortune that went to only one person, she left for her one and only child, her daughter, A'Lelia. A'Lelia was quite a rare breed. Before her, there had been no super rich single Black heiresses in the United States who were made wealthy because of their mother's hard work. Also, standing at 6 feet tall with dark chocolate skin and dubbed the Mahogany Millionairess because of it, she was definitely something that Harlem had never seen before. But she wasn't rare in comparison to other rich people's children who were their parents' heirs. Like many of them, she found it hard to be a second act, and a less impressive one, in a business that was not her own. So perhaps she became a party girl, a socialite, in order to carve out her own identity. A'Lelia didn't have her mother's sharp instinct for making money, but she surely did know how to spend it. As a matter of fact, A'Lelia preferred spending her money rather than giving it away to charity, as her mother had so frequently done. And when A'Lelia spent, she spent big. She was a regular at Manhattan's most exclusive jewelers and car dealerships, and she kept a custom dressmaker busy, making her extravagant party wear. When Madam C.J. Walker passed away, A'Lelia didn't just get the money. She also got the position as president of Madam C.J. Walker Manufacturing Company. But there were times when it seemed as though A'Lelia was president only in name. She left a lot of the running to the company in the hands of Freeman Briley Ransom, Madam C.J. Walker's long-trusted legal counselor, who became the chief manager for the business. For the next few years after her mother's death, The company thrived as it always had, but by 1923, competition in black haircare was popping up on almost every corner of Harlem. In the face of all of this competition that threatened their business, F.B. Ransom asked Alelia, the president of the company, for suggestions about boosting sales. Her nonchalant written response to him was, quote, "I feel we have exploited this field thoroughly and are getting as much right now out of this business as any concern is getting or can get," end quote. Perhaps this lack of interest should have been a sign of what was to come. Alelia, it seems, had a different calling from the one that her mother had laid out for her. Her calling was to make her mark on the social scene, and as frivolous as that may sound, she tried to do it with purpose. And one of her trademark ways to establish herself as a New York City it girl was to throw extravagant, expensive parties. Harlem Renaissance leader and prolific writer Langston Hughes was one of Alelia's frequent invitees. The two were very close friends. Her party hostessing was done in high style and with very high budgets. Having her type of money set her leagues apart from almost every other black person and frankly white person in the city, and it also set her leagues apart from what they could afford to do, where they could afford to go, and what they could afford to buy. Another element of her soirees that set them apart was the fact that they were in what people would call mixed company, meaning that her parties were interracial, a thing that was almost unheard of in the 1920s, especially for a black hostess. At that time, having interracial party guests was more common for white hosts, like Alelia's friend, Carl Van Vechten, who was a writer and patron of the Harlem Renaissance. Along with the races of her guests being different from each other, so were their occupations and backgrounds. At any given Alelia Walker affair, you could find artists, English Rothschilds, dancers, French princesses, jazz musicians, Russian dukes, poets, mobsters, prize fighters, and white movie celebrities. Some of the people were heterosexual, some of them were homosexual. She was especially fond of homosexuals at a time when most people in Harlem weren't. She didn't deal with homophobic people, at least not those who were openly homophobic. If they were, they would have to hold their tongues if they wanted to be at her gatherings. She wanted her homes to be safe places for everyone, especially homosexuals, to socialize. Her multiple elegant brownstones and her mansion were open to anyone who she deemed to be interesting enough and daring enough to enter. Her parties were legendary and earned her the title the Joy Goddess of Harlem from Langston Hughes. Along with Langston Hughes, who was often in attendance, were sociologist W.E.B. Du Bois, writer James Weldon Johnson, jazz singer Alberta Hunter, author Zora Neale Hurston, and poet Countee Cullen, all huge names in the Harlem Renaissance. Some of her parties were more on the tame and quiet side, intellectual and literary gatherings. Then some of her parties were called, quote, funny parties. At least that's what attendee and Harlem dancer and open lesbian Mabel Hampton would call them. This is what she had to say about Alelia's funny parties. Quote, there were men and women, straight and gay. There were kinds of orgies. Some people had clothes on, some didn't. Some would hug and kiss on pillows and do anything they wanted to do. You could watch if you wanted to. Some came to watch, some came to play. End quote. Wow. These so-called funny parties are likely the cause of the seemingly erroneous rumor about Alelia that she was a lesbian. She was married 3 times, all very short marriages, and obviously simply being married doesn't prove that someone isn't homosexual. But A'Lelia Bundles, who is A'Lelia Walker's great-granddaughter and also the author of the Madam C.J. Walker biography, has endured painstaking research to ensure that the true stories are revealed about Madam C.J. Walker and A'Lelia Walker. None of her research has led her to any findings that A'Lelia Walker was a lesbian. When A'Lelia entertained during the weekdays, she most often did so at her palatial double brownstone on 136th Street. It was in fact 2 already large brownstones that she paid an architect to convert into an even larger one. When she entertained on the weekends, she most often did so at Villa Lewaro, the 34-room mansion that her mother had built and lived in for only 1 year before her death. So, what could have been so costly when it came to A'Lelia's parties that her massive fortune was gone when she died? Well, dressing her servants in and of itself would have been enough to financially ruin most people in 1920s Harlem. She would dress her black male servants in doublets and hose and white wigs. Plus, she had to hire just the right people to make every party an event. To that end, on her party payrolls were photographers, caterers, and musicians. And when I say musicians, I don't mean just a guy or two with a guitar or a horn. She would hire full orchestras to play at her parties. And according to Carl Van Vechten, even the company that A'Lelia kept was costing her money. He said that she was not a good judge of character and surrounded herself with parasites who were all too happy to attend her parties and be friends with her as long as she had a lot of money. Beyond that, she would even allow some artists to live in her brownstones rent-free for extended periods of time. In addition to the people who pretended to like her, there were also party attendees who openly did not like her. Some thought she wasn't smart enough. Some of her white friends thought that because she was black, that she didn't deserve what she had. And even some black people thought that she didn't deserve what she had because she was a dark-skinned black person. The best of what black people should get should have gone to lighter complexioned blacks in their minds. That was definitely the way of the world at that time. Nevertheless, they all gobbled down A'Lelia's expensive food and champagne. And whatever they didn't like about her dark skin, they had to deal with on their own. For A'Lelia never fell prey to the skin bleaching cream ads that crowded Harlem's newspapers in her time. She was proud of how she looked, and standing a reported 6 feet tall, though a few sources say that she was only 5'9". I'm sure that her presence was noticed when she entered a room. But back to her parties. They became a place where whomever she invited could bring along whomever they invited too, thus doubling or tripling the planned costs of her gatherings. She really fancied her homes as safe havens for the artists of the Harlem Renaissance, and it seems that some of those people took advantage of her hospitality. Well, after entertaining all of these friends, enemies, and strangers at her expense for so long, she decided to go into the business of entertaining them. She turned the first floor of her brownstone into a club and named it Dark Tower, a name that she took from a column in Opportunity magazine that was written by County Cullen. Everything was still just as extravagant as before. The only difference was that now she was charging for what people had already been able to get without paying for. You want to check your hat? That will be 15 cents. You want a cup of coffee? That will be 10 cents. You want a cup of lemonade? That will be 25 cents. You want a sandwich? That will be 50 cents. Well, when you're used to getting all of that stuff for 0 cents, paying for any of it just seems silly. So you can imagine that it was grand opening, grand closing for A'Lelia, and this venture was doomed to fail from the start. Her friends wanted everything from her for free. A'Lelia's extravagant spending didn't stop at her parties and her cars. She liked to travel too, and nothing could be done on the cheap. In November of 1921, she left for a solo 5-month trip, touring Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Before we get into the high-dollar excursions in which she engaged on this trip, let's look at how she traveled. She sailed aboard the SS Paris, and her race was not a barrier to allowing her to be in first class because she had a lot of money. The SS Paris was one of the most luxurious cruise ships of its time. Take a look here at its grand stairway entrance and dining salon to get an idea of its magnificence. The SS Paris did indeed sail under the French flag, and that likely has everything to do with why A'Lelia chose it versus an American ship. She most likely would have faced less racism on a French ship, and at the time of her trip, the USA was stuck under prohibition laws, and she wouldn't have been able to get an alcoholic beverage on an American ship. So her choice was an easy and expensive one. Now, on this vacation, she toured the pyramids in Egypt on camelback, attended an opera at Covent Garden in London, witnessed the coronation of Pope Pius XI in Rome, and while in Paris, she was invited to a private diamond showing at Cartier. This one trip would have cost more than the entire life savings of a lot of people in her time, and even today. So, you can see that A'Lelia spent the 1920s spending a great deal of her fortune, and she spent the year of 1930 losing what was left, trying to hold on to something for herself. When the money was flowing, it was flowing freely. But when financial times got bad, they got really bad. She tried to sell Villa Lewaro to her friend, Carl Van Vechten, for a rock-bottom price that was way less than its assessed price. But he had neither the interest nor, more importantly, the money to buy the mansion, even at a deep discount. In 1930, A'Lelia would auction off all of the villa's contents. On Thanksgiving weekend of that year, bargain hunters swarmed the house and grounds, snapping up artwork and antiques for extremely low prices. The furnishings, which alone cost in excess of $350,000 when Madam C.J. Walker had her fabulous villa built, pulled in only $58,000 at the auction. This was truly the end of an era. Multiple high-end properties, gone. Fine cars, gone. Expensive furnishings and antiques, gone. Emeralds, sapphires, rubies, pearls, and diamonds, gone. Yes, the former toast of the town rich girl had to pawn most of her jewelry. The downsizing that A'Lelia had to do was tremendous. When all was said and done, she managed to hold on to her silver, her grand piano, and her favorite car, her Lincoln. But even losing most of what she owned couldn't stomp the party girl spirit out of A'Lelia Walker. She continued to eat rich foods and visit rich friends. The August following the auction at the mansion, smack dab at the start of the Great Depression, she was still determined to have a good time. So she drove to Long Branch, New Jersey for the weekend-long birthday celebration of one of her friends. The Sunday of that weekend, August 16th, A'Lelia dined like money wasn't a problem. She also dined like her high blood pressure and history of overeating weren't problems, medical problems. She ate a whole lobster and a chocolate cake, and she paired her high-calorie meal with her favorite drink, champagne. In the wee hours of Monday morning, around 4 a.m., A'Lelia woke up and complained about having a headache and blurry vision. In the worst way, history was repeating itself for the Walker women. A'Lelia made it known that she didn't want to live like her mother, but here she was, on the verge of dying like her mother. Madam C.J. Walker had received warnings from her doctors to eat a lower-calorie, health-conscious diet because of her hypertension. And when the madam didn't take heed to those warnings, she died from kidney failure due to hypertension at the age of 51. And here lay A'Lelia, after receiving the same warnings from her own doctors as her mother had received. After having had a stroke in 1924 when she visited Los Angeles. After watching her own mother die, A'Lelia would not wake up to see the rest of that Monday morning. On August 17, 1931, she died of a cerebral hemorrhage caused by hypertension. She was only 46, 5 years younger than her mother was at the time of her death. To put things into a fair perspective, the stock market crash of 1929 exacerbated A'Lelia's financial downfall. American businesses were hit hard by the crash, and the Walker Manufacturing Company was no different. The very expensive new headquarters and manufacturing facility, which opened with so much optimism in 1927, was now an additional expense, adding to what was already more than enough financial pressure by 1929. A'Lelia, like so many business owners, just didn't see it coming. The stock market crash or the Great Depression that followed it. But I think that it's also very fair to say that had she not spent so frivolously in the first place, the fortune that her mother left for her would have been enough to last her throughout the entire Great Depression and beyond, had she lived to see the day. Madam C.J. Walker famously told a group of black women at a convention in 1913, quote, "I want to say to every Negro woman present, don't sit down and wait for the opportunities to come. Get up and make them." End quote. And A'Lelia, her own daughter, had no such compulsion and would never live by those words. Madam C.J. Walker was known to spoil A'Lelia and give in to her every whim. In her quest to give her daughter everything that she did not have as a child, did Madam C.J. Walker create a monster or a spoiled brat? Or did she in some way, unknowingly, set up her daughter for failure? As the first black American heiress, did A'Lelia blow it? Was she a complete disaster? Or should the financial hardships that the country was facing be considered in her downfall? Please comment. I'd love to see your answers. At this point, we can only guess. Both women became millionaires in the 1910s, each selling her own brand of haircare products. Both women are to be celebrated, but a lot more people are familiar with the name and story of Madam C.J. Walker, who was known as the first black millionaire and the first woman to become a self-made millionaire. Before her time, there were certainly white women who were millionaires, but it was because of inherited wealth, usually from a husband or father. And often, when the name Madam C.J. Walker is getting some praise, there's a group of people, usually who are from St. Louis, angrily asking, but what about Annie Turnbo Malone? I understand the questioning as much as I hate it. I'll explain why a little later. But more than anything today, I want to honor both of them, talk about their similarities and their differences. For example, they both married men who they basically employed. A similarity. But while Madam C.J. Walker married a man who was a newspaper advertising salesman and therefore could and did help her to elevate her business, Annie Turnbo Malone married a man who had been a teacher, and she elevated him to the office of president of her company. He was not qualified to run her business in the capacity that was required of him, and when he divorced her in 1927, she paid dearly, which is why I say that although a picture has been painted that calls out Madam C.J. Walker as Annie Turnbo Malone's rival, her real rival was her husband, Aaron Eugene Malone. Annie Turnbo was sleeping with the enemy, and he was a flaming hot mess. Let's get into it. If all of your knowledge about Madam C.J. Walker and Annie Turnbo Malone came from Netflix's self-made miniseries, delete that from your mind right now. That story did neither one of those amazing women any justice. No matter how much or how little you know about either lady, let's kind of start over. Let's talk about their backgrounds. Annie Turnbo Malone was born Annie Minerva Turnbo in 1869 in Metropolis, Illinois, to parents who were formerly enslaved. She was the 10th of 11 children, and she was orphaned when she was a very young girl. It's an understatement to say that her childhood was rough, but one thing that always seemed to be able to lift her spirits was styling her sister's hair, and she was really good at it. Annie attended public school when she went to live with an older sister in Peoria. She started high school but was not able to finish due to frequent illness that kept her from attending class regularly. But one of her favorite subjects was chemistry, and she would put it to use just a few years after having to drop out of school. Annie was also an observant girl and learned the importance of grooming and appearance for Black women. It was always a plus to look good, but Annie understood that having a pleasing appearance was an indicator of a woman's social standing. She used that knowledge as a motivating factor to put her passion for hairstyling to good use for herself and for Black women in general. And to be clear, Annie started serving Black women not in an effort to be divisive and not serve white women. When she started off catering to Black women around the year 1900, it was because the Black women of her time had practically no one who knew how to care for their hair, and there was a major lack of products and tools that Black women needed. The exact opposite was the case for white women, so Annie tapped into a virtually unserved market. Remember, Annie's parents were former slaves, so in 1900, a lot of the Black population in the United States had either been enslaved or were first-generation free women and men. So times were really hard. A lot of people didn't have running water, which is a must for a healthy hair routine of any type. And education about anything was a luxury, but certainly education about how to care for curly, coily, and kinky hair just wasn't even a thing. Black women got off of the plantation and went into the workforce. And those who wanted jobs that paid better than a servant's wage would need to assimilate, make their hair look smooth and presentable, which meant most often less like their own natural texture, and as smooth and straight as they could possibly get, closer to the texture of a white woman's hair. And Black women in those days were doing some counterproductive and downright dangerous things in order to achieve straight hair. Very commonly, they would use animal fats and even soap and bacon grease as straightening agents. Bacon grease, can you imagine? Then, thankfully, Annie Turnbo came along to share the Haircare line that she had developed and started using on her sister's hair and her own. Her flagship product was called Hair Grower, and it became a bestseller for her. But she wasn't just selling products. She was also servicing her clients, treating their hair and scalps. One by one, she was educating Black women on how to care for their hair, and they were seeing results, so they became her customers. After finding success in Illinois, Annie Turnbo moved her operations to St. Louis, where she continued manufacturing her products, but on a larger scale. And she opened the Poirot College Company. There, she would continue to provide hair and scalp treatments for her customers and also train other women to provide the same services and hire sales agents to go door to door selling her hair care products. And it was there in St. Louis where she met Sarah Breedlove. Sarah came in as a client who was going bald due to illness, a poor diet, and lack of proper hair and scalp hygiene. And I want to be clear that when I say lack of hygiene, this applied to most Americans across the country, both Black and white. Most people at this time didn't have the things that we take for granted today, like electricity and indoor plumbing. But back to Sarah Breedlove. After her hair started growing because of Annie's treatments, she enrolled at Poirot College, became a Poirot sales agent for Annie, then eventually she became Annie's biggest business rival. Sarah Breedlove was Madam C.J. Walker. Now, before I tell you about the hot mess that is Annie's husband, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Madam C.J. Walker. I don't feel the need to spend a lot of time here because a lot more people know about her than know about Annie Turnbo. And there's a lot more information that one can easily find about Madam C.J. Walker for those who want to learn more. I'm just going to talk about the similarities between these two women and a couple of differences that I believe are the reasons why Madam C.J. Walker's name is still more widely celebrated than Annie Turnbo Malone's, even though Annie Turnbo was successful in business before Madam C.J. Walker. Like Annie Turnbo, Madam Walker was born to parents who had been enslaved. Also like Annie, she was the second last born of her siblings, though Walker came from a smaller family. She only had 5 siblings. Like Annie, she was also born into freedom, not slavery. Another similarity, she was orphaned at an early age and had to live with siblings. And just like Annie, Madam Walker also learned at a very young age that Black women who were put together well got more respect and were treated better in society. She had a very rough start at life, but she was determined to get to the other side where she would be treated like those refined Black women. And obviously, just like Annie Malone, Madam C.J. Walker also started her own black hair products company that earned her a fortune. Both women built schools to train women how to use their products and start their own businesses. Both women employed sales agents that worked not only in this country, the United States, but many countries around the world. Alaska, which in the 1910s was not yet a part of the United States, Canada, countries in Central and South America, many island nations in the Caribbean, the Philippines, and even some countries in Africa. Both women bought a lot of real estate. Madam C.J. Walker even owned a drugstore, a coffee shop, and a theater which still exists today and is in use as the Madam Walker Legacy Center. And both of these women donated a lot of money to a lot of worthy causes. Also, both ladies married more than once, and they both brought on their husbands to help them run their businesses. And this is where some dissimilarities come into play that were critical in their journeys. Unlike Annie, Walker did not receive a formal education, but this is actually where she got the edge on Annie Turnbo, because she knew how to learn from people who were smarter than she, and how to delegate duties for the things that she did not know how to do. And she had a real knack for picking just the right people. Her third husband, Charles Joseph Walker, was one of those right people. For business, not marriage. He was known to cheat on Madam C.J. quite openly, even with one of her employees. But when they started in business together, he helped her to get her already successful business to the next level. Now, Madam C.J. Walker is someone to be admired. I don't care how you slice it. But her start in the hair care business looks shady at best. And I think this is why Annie Turnbo Malone supporters get bent out of shape when they see how much Madam C.J. Walker is celebrated. In 1905, Walker was still working as a Poro agent for Annie Turnbo. She relocated to Denver, Colorado to sell the products there. In the same year, she also started developing her own products that seemed to be very similar to Annie's. This is how she said she got the formula for her products. Quote, "God answered my prayer. For one night I had a dream, and in that dream, a big black man appeared to me and told me what to mix up for my hair." End quote. A black man told you something useful? Ha, you're right. Well, I'm just kidding about that, y'all. But seriously, that was her story. That was what she said. Now, I'm just going to say that I don't believe that. I 100% believe that she was, let's say, heavily inspired by Annie Turnbo's products that were right in her house because she was selling them. I see her very much as the John Amos character from Coming to America, whose McDowell fast food restaurant seemed to have a lot of similarity with McDonald's. After all, Walker was selling Poro Hair Grower. Then she created Wonderful Hair Grower. I think that that's more than a coincidence, but I have to point out that this formula was nothing new. It had been around for more than 100 years, so it didn't belong to Annie or Walker. As a matter of fact, they weren't even the only two people who were selling it. They were just the biggest names in the game. A news page from the New York Age in 1915 shows 5 different companies selling some variation of the same product. Each company just put their own spin on it, maybe adding an extra oil or a fragrance, then putting it out on the market. But Annie Turnbo and Madam Walker are the ones who became the most successful at it, which brings us back to Madam Walker's husband. He was a newspaper man in advertising sales. He knew about advertising and what made a product sell, and he had a lot of connections that he used to help Madam CJ expand her business rapidly. She had gained a lot of knowledge from the Poirot College, very likely also studying Annie's products, and from her brothers. 3 of them were barbers and owned their own barbershop. There's no doubt that at the start, Madam C.J. Walker and her husband were partners, each who brought something unique and very necessary to the business. Unlike Aaron Eugene Malone, Annie Turnbo's husband. They had known each other in childhood, then reacquainted as adults. He made a living for himself in education, first as a teacher, then later as a school principal. Though at the time Annie Turnbo reunited with him in adulthood, he was a Bible salesman. The couple had reportedly dated in high school, then in 1914, Aaron ran into Annie and rekindled the sparks, and asked her to marry him. She said yes, then the Topeka plain dealer wrote all about it. Their wedding would take place on April 28, 1914. One thing that I find interesting about the coverage of the upcoming nuptials was that Annie and Aaron were described as wealthy, both of them. He was dressed up as some businessman and property owner. Annie was described as being at the very top of her field with a thriving business, the biggest of its kind. Keep that in mind, because when we get to the point in their relationship when he sues her for divorce in 1927, none of his properties are included in the marital assets that need to be split, just Annie's company, which he said that he helped to get off the ground. He made it sound as if she hadn't been wildly successful before he entered the picture. Annie did her best to make the public believe that Aaron was a suitable financial match for her. She was covering for him. She propped him up to make it seem as though he came into the relationship with more money than she had, and later, that he was the reason for the success of her Poirot brand. She would come to regret this decision. But she did it because she was a product of her era. It was the 1910s and 1920s, a time when men prided themselves on financially providing for their wives. For a woman of her stature to marry down would have been shameful and embarrassing. She didn't want to make him look like a broke fool, because it would have reflected badly on her too. And Aaron was lucky. He had not only Annie's help to make him look good, but the local press too. For example, in a very short story that was about Aaron, according to its title, which was Malone, once teacher, now a rich manufacturer, the story went on to detail how Annie made a federal income tax payment of over $38,000 for 1 year, which made her one of the largest taxpayers in her city. Adjusted for inflation, that is almost $700,000 in today's 2024 money, which proves that Annie was making some serious dough in the 1920s. Yet the title was about Aaron going from being a teacher to a rich manufacturer. He rode her coattails and she let him, until she got tired of it. Actually, until he got tired of it, and we'll get there, but for years, this couple put on a perfect show. They were St. Louis's favorite and richest Black power couple. They donated a lot of money to schools, social causes, and political leaders. Annie's school building provided more than just a place for her Poirot women to learn her hair care system. Again, this was the 1910s and 1920s, and even though Annie and the Black people in her circle had a lot of money, America was still very segregated. So if they wanted to go someplace extravagant, their skin color would prevent them from being admitted into white establishments. But all was well. Annie saw this problem and fixed it by allowing the doors of Poro College to open for banquets and a myriad of social functions. She, as the founder, and Aaron, as the president of Poro, were everything that any black couple could aspire to be, or so they thought from the outside looking in. However, truthfully, Annie was getting tired of her husband, and the public just didn't know. But they would find out in February of 1927 when he filed to divorce her. Just her, not her money. He still wanted that. So, how did the couple get here? Because when the times were good, they seemed to be really good. Annie and Aaron were called the leaders of the St. Louis Negro world. Business was going so well that Poro had 75,000 agents selling its products all over the globe. They were bringing in $250,000 per year. That's almost $8 million in today's money. And when the money is rolling in like that, what do? You spend it, and the Malones did. They traveled to Europe several times in their 13-year marriage. Sometimes it was for business to check on their operations there, but often it was for pleasure. And you have to understand that transatlantic travel was not something that people could easily just do for fun in those days, especially black people. And not only could Annie afford to take those trips, but she could afford to take those trips in style, in first-class accommodations. I think that this one sentence from the St. Louis Star and Times illustrates their lifestyle succinctly. Quote, "They had toured Europe together, and they had lived in a style that most persons of any color could never attain." End quote. She was respected by wealthy white businessmen because she was earning as much money as they were. Annie was already doing quite well before Aaron came into the picture. She was earning, by our standards, $850,000 per year. Aaron did add a little value, but not anywhere near as much as he gave himself credit for. His contribution was a relatively small one, using his former Bible sales stops as places to distribute her products. The Malones were always attending and even hosting charity functions. And when they hosted anything, they did it on a grand scale at the school. In 1920, they added a huge reception hall to the school that enabled them to really go all out for their social functions. I can't stress just how big of a deal this was, especially for the handful of upper-middle-class black people who had money to donate to charity and spend on tuxedos and ball gowns and luxury cars. They couldn't simply just rent out white-owned banquet halls at that time. Annie's ballroom gave them a meeting place for their version of high society, and its opening was covered by black newspapers from all over the nation and attended by wealthy black people from several states. In the 3 years before their divorce, they had given away over $90,000 in donations to a number of organizations, attending those galas all dressed up and hand in hand. Among those recipients of funds from the Malones were Howard University and what was then called the Negro YMCA. These two were the picture of a loving, supportive couple. Now, the citizens of St. Louis were surprised to hear about this divorce filing when it came, but Annie most likely wasn't. Things at home had not been feeling lovey-dovey for well over a year before Aaron filed to divorce her. Here's what the divorce petition revealed. The Malones had been living at Poro College for at least a couple of years before the divorce. There were a number of living quarters there, so that's not really the issue. The problem was that the couple had been living in separate quarters since February 28, 1925, almost 2 years before Aaron filed for divorce. Not only had they not been living together, they had not spoken to each other since May of 1926. That's 8 months of silence. 8 months of not having to hear the old ball and chain nag. Sounds like a vacation, right, fellas? No, again, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding, ladies. Here's what Aaron had to say about Annie. Quote, Malone charges that Mrs. Malone had an ungovernable temper, that she falsely accused him of infidelity, and has refused to speak to him since May. He charges that on February 28, 1925, he returned home one night to find his clothes in the students' quarters, with the locks on his family quarters and the library changed. He alleges that this action was a desertion, and it is on this ground that the divorce is sought. End quote. When I say that Aaron gave himself too much credit for the success of the Poro Corporation, this is what I mean and why Annie was so upset. As a corporation, Poro had 100 shares of stock. Annie did not like that 97 of those 100 were in her husband's name. At some point, the corporation dissolved and a partnership agreement was made, with each party having half interest. But by this point, he had proven himself to be greedy and not trustworthy. All of this was going on behind the scenes while the Malones continued to put on happy faces for the public to see. But if any of those people who were admiring the Malones' relationship up close had a keen eye, they might have been able to detect a few cracks in their marital facade, because a couple of incidents took place right before their very eyes. Annie would hold graduation ceremonies for the women who attended Poro College and mastered various hair care and styling techniques. After she got married, both she and Aaron would attend and perform duties at the graduations. Each year, Aaron would make the commencement speech and Annie would present the diplomas. Well, when it came time for the June graduation of 1925, Annie took a little vacation and left the city, leaving Aaron to give the speech and perform her usual task of handing out the diplomas. One might call her actions a bit passive-aggressive. What do you think? Annie was fed up. She'd had it up to here. If I were on camera, you'd see my hand slightly above my head, indicating her level of piss-offedness at her coattail-riding husband, but alas, I'm not on camera. Here's another example of one of her public displays of resentment for her husband that was printed in the St. Louis Star. While the Malones were hosting a banquet in their fabulous ballroom, Annie ordered for Aaron's plate and chair to be removed from the head of the table. Boy, oh boy. If that was not the most public way of saying, you are not the head of this household, I don't know what is. And it was at that moment that he knew that he needed to file for divorce. As long as she didn't respect him privately, it was okay, because he could still look like the big man to the public. But public disrespect in front of their rich circle proved to be too much for Aaron's ego to bear. And with the divorce story now public, Annie went on and spoke her piece. Now, we all know that Annie had an innate knowledge of how Black women needed to present themselves in order to be respected. That was a huge part of her business, giving Black women the right hair to help them get their feet in the doors of the right places, along with teaching etiquette and anything else that would help Black women appear to be more polished. That was who she was. But after Aaron called her out, all of that etiquette went out of the door. She went into full-blown code switching mode. In case you don't know what code switching is, it is simply customizing one's style of speech to address a particular situation or audience. So, while I'm sure that 95% of the time, this is the Annie that people got. Hello, I'm Annie Turnbo Malone. Welcome to Poro College, where I can show you the science of growing your hair and growing your bank account. This is the Annie that they got after Aaron filed for divorce and started flapping his gums about her to the press. Aaron? That sorry-ass, good-for-nothing, broke-ass Negro didn't run a goddamn thing over here. This lazy, Bible-selling Negro didn't have 2 pairs of shoes when I met him. He came around me creeping on a come-up. Okay. I'm paraphrasing slightly, and I'm sure that she didn't say all of that, but she did say a lot. On January 15th, 1927, she made a public statement about her husband's request for a divorce and his claims against her. It was printed in the St. Louis Globe-Democrat, and here are her own words. Quote, "All I can say is, God forgive him, for he knows not what he does." That college belongs to me to the last penny. And now he claims partnership, saying he made Poro College a national institution. I gave him the job of manager of Poro College in 1914 when we were married, so that he wouldn't be embarrassed. But he was only technically a manager and never contributed even an idea to the business. I transacted business as usual, thought out every move and directed every step, and let him think it was his doing. I did that to avert just this controversy, but he would continue to antagonize me and everyone he came in contact with, and the break finally had to come." End quote. My. Since the 1920s, it has never worked well for these wealthy, famous women to marry the hired help. Ask Mary J. Blige, Kelly Clarkson, and Wendy Williams. I'm sure that there are many more examples that you can think of. Put them in the comments. After all that Annie had to say about Aaron and his audacity to sue her, it remained his contention that it was his business experience that had made Poro a success, even though his only prior business experience had been selling Bibles. Nevertheless, he wanted half interest in Poro College. After Aaron filed for the divorce, the couple didn't waste any time getting on with the process. They both hired lawyers. Annie's attorney was Charles Nagel. Just before Annie hired him, President Calvin Coolidge had appointed him to head a governmental agricultural commission. He was a prominent, high-class heavy hitter. Aaron's lawyer was a man named Edward Forrestal, and he had a reputation for winning cases that most people said had no merit. He took on big money cases, and as a rule, part of his fee was 50% of whatever he won for his clients. So he had every reason to take on Aaron as a client. He had the potential to make a huge fortune off of him. Early in the proceedings, Annie took a loss when the judge presiding over the divorce temporarily removed her as head of the organization and replaced her with a court-appointed receiver. His duties were to sign all checks and control her massive daily income. For as long as the receivership was in place, he superseded Annie in authority of her own business. On his first day at Poro, he called all of the department heads in for a meeting, in which he informed them that he was putting a stop payment on all outstanding checks. The most important detail that he let them know was that he was the boss now. The St. Paul Echo described him as a gentleman of the crimson neck variety. And I must say that that is the most colorful way that I have ever seen anyone call a man a white man. And he did make a point to let Annie's staff know that things would be different because he was a white man who was now in charge. The whole situation was messy, but finally on May 23rd, the couple was divorced. But oddly enough, the St. Louis Star reported that Annie was awarded her divorce. And I can't really explain that since the husband is the one who filed. Maybe she filed separately and later. I won't pretend to know. I'm just sharing with you what I learned from my sources. It was reported that she paid a $200,000 settlement to him. Remember that his lawyer got to keep half of that. And even though that $200,000 made him rich, Aaron continued being a grubby little scoundrel with women, well, with people in general. During the process of the divorce, he hired a woman named Maddie Beasley to be his own personal stenographer. He promised to pay her $10 a week plus a $2,500 flat fee. He paid her all the $10 weekly payments, but never the $2,500. Right after he settled for his payday from Annie, he was sued 4 times within 1 week from July 18th to the 23rd, all stemming from the side deals that he had related to Annie's business, directly or indirectly. Another lawsuit was from a man named William Dawson, who also owned an interest in Annie's property. But he was suing Aaron because his dealings had been with him. He was looking for $7,500. I wasn't able to find out how these lawsuits ended, but it sounds like Aaron continued to be Aaron. He got married again and died in 1953. His second wife left him years before he died. She just never divorced him. Now, that was Annie's ex-husband. But remember how I told you about a number of things that set Madam C.J. Walker apart and frankly ahead of Mrs. Malone. One of those differences was that Madam Walker had a knack for hiring competent and trustworthy people to help her run her business. Annie didn't have that going for her, and her husband was only one of a number of people who brought lawsuits against her and or her company, thus adding to its downfall. Shortly after she married Aaron, another man sued her, and he had made claims that were very similar to her husband's. This man's name was Walter Majors, and his lawsuit was weird. Like her husband, he claimed that it was he who did all of the work to put her business on the map and gave her all of the ideas that put money in her pockets. Well, Annie claimed that this man was nothing more than her chauffeur. This case got even crazier when Annie's lawyer quit defending her, because she told him that she was only going to pay his entire fee if she won. According to the St. Louis Dispatch, he told her, "I am my own judge when I need money," and he left her to find another lawyer. Also, in the same article, it was very clear that the paper had a problem with the notion that Poro College was a college. The word was written several times, and every time in quotations, to the point that it got ridiculous. It was super petty. The writer also seemed to have an issue with the fact that Annie had a fancy car and liveried servants. I understand that Poro wasn't a 4-year university, but beauty school or cosmetology school is school. I know that I like for my hairstylist to have a license, but I digress. Long story short, after 22 years of litigation, Annie lost the breach of contract lawsuit with this man and had to pay him $20,000 in 1937, 10 years after her divorce had been finalized, and parts of his litigation overlap her divorce. Then, later in the same year after her divorce was finalized, Annie got hit with another weird lawsuit. This time it was a black male newspaper editor named Edgar G. Brown. For some reason, he had been escorted out of Annie's auditorium during a musical performance. Annie had him removed by police officers. Not much was written about this case, but he was suing for humiliation, claiming that he felt insulted, frightened, and humiliated as a result of being kicked out of her auditorium. And he just wanted a little pay for his pain. Just $100,000, about $1.8 million by our standards today. This fool said that the police officers were armed with nightsticks and badges. Armed with badges. And that intimidated him. I never saw the outcome of this one either, but I can't imagine that Annie would have been ordered to pay him $100,000 for getting thrown out of her venue. There were other lawsuits, but the point is that Annie had a lot of people around her who were not trustworthy, who turned their backs on her, and it sounds like there were times when she turned her own back on people who might have been doing right by her. Nevertheless, she went on to live a good life. But after paying her husband a huge sum of money in the divorce, her Poro empire was never the same. There were a number of lawsuits, then she moved the company's headquarters to Chicago. After that came the stock market crash of 1929, then the Great Depression that negatively affected her business and almost every other business in the country. Poro didn't go under, but it never regained its original momentum. Annie lived out the remainder of her life giving to philanthropic causes and being honored as an innovator in the black haircare industry. Her story deserves to be told, and her name deserves to be remembered. I do think that it's sad that her legacy is largely a footnote in Madam C.J. Walker's story, especially when Annie gave Walker her start in the industry. That being said, I can certainly understand why Madam Walker's name had a wider reach and why it is still the one that is more recognized today. Madam C.J. Walker, though she did not have the education that Annie Malone had an innate ability to deliver good marketing also, and that resonated with the audience she wanted to serve. Often Annie would use biracial women in her marketing materials. They would have called them mulattoes in her day. And while this was a look that many black women aspired to back then, and some still today, they would never look like that. Most of the women who purchased those hair growers looked more like Madam Walker and Annie. So Walker put her own before and after pictures on her products, letting black women know that having a white parent wasn't the secret ingredient to long, healthy hair. Now, Madam Walker died in 1919, so she didn't get to lead her business for as long as Annie had led hers. So who's to say if maybe she would have hit some of the same stumbling blocks that Annie did in her long career. But in her time as the head of the Madam C.J. Walker Company, her business was not plagued with lawsuits in the way that Annie's was. And she hired people who she trusted and who trusted her and who wanted her to succeed. Annie just didn't have that going for her. Yet and still, she accomplished so much. And even though Madam C.J. Walker goes down in history as the first black self-made millionaire, Annie got there too. Both of these women accomplished that feat in the 1910s. Before anti-lynching laws or the civil rights movement or affirmative action, these two women who were born to parents who had been slaves became a couple of the richest people in the world. And that should be celebrated. It's recorded in history that Madam C.J. Walker was the first one to become a millionaire. And some people say that that's not true, that Annie got there first, but let's say that the history is the truth. If the Guinness Book of World Records got it right, and Madam Walker was a millionaire first, Annie was right on her heels, and she was making hundreds of thousands of dollars at that time. And if the truth is vice versa, still, both women accomplished something major. Now, I don't think that it will ever happen, but I'd love to see people move past the comparisons and scarcity mindsets when it comes to things that black women achieve and realize that there is room for all of us. I'll never forget when I was a young girl and my parents had a subscription to Ebony magazine. There was an issue that had on the cover Whitney Houston, Janet Jackson, and Anita Baker, asking which one was the best. As young as I was, even then I knew that these women shouldn't have been compared in that way. They are all very different. The only thing that they had in common was their huge success, but we were told to pick one. And the same type of thing happened before then and continues now with black women. So many people are still trying to figure out who is the queen of rap instead of enjoying the fact that a lot of women are doing well in that field. And it's something that I don't even see happen with black men. I don't know how many rappers look something like this. And the people who like them, like all of them. There are no contests in which one must choose his favorite red-headed dreadlock-wearing rapper. And I could be wrong, but I don't think that the same type of comparisons exist for white women. I'm an 80s kid, and as far as I know, it was okay to like Madonna and Cyndi Lauper and Pat Benatar and Annie Lennox. White women, please let me know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe my white friends didn't let me in on all of the pop music secrets. But there I go on another tangent. One of the points of this video is obviously that both Madam C.J. Walker and Annie Turnbo Malone deserve recognition. It should be and not or when it comes to them. Madam Walker is celebrated worldwide, and Annie's legacy is revered in St. Louis, where she made her fortune. She died in 1957 after suffering a stroke, and the Annie Malone Children and Family Services Agency still thrives today, carrying out its mission to improve the quality of life for children, something that was very near and dear to Mrs. Malone's heart. St. Louis also holds an annual Annie Malone May Day parade in their downtown. I love that the city won't let their heroine's legacy die. And I understand their frustration at why she isn't more well known. Her legacy also lives on through the sorority Zeta Phi Beta. She was inducted as an honorary member in 1926. Now, the other, maybe not so obvious point of this video is to hopefully inspire someone. I don't know when you are watching this, but I premiered it on New Year's Day 2024 for a very intentional reason. The start of a new year is often a time when people set goals and resolutions for themselves. And it is my hope that the rags to riches stories of two Black women who were born to parents who were slaves inspires you to know that you can do anything. Madam C.J. Walker didn't start her company until she was 41 years old, and I believe that Annie Malone was just slightly younger, around 37 when she started hers. Today, we say that's kind of old to get something started. But I hope that you don't just enjoy this story. I mean, it's a great story, don't get me wrong. This is my favorite channel. But there is a takeaway from this story that no matter who you are, Black, white, Asian, Latino, woman, or man, if you want to do something, do it. There's still time because you're still breathing. Go do the thing, whatever the thing is. Start that business. Break that addiction. Go back to school and get that degree. Lose that weight. Apply for that promotion. Leave that abusive relationship. I've done that. Start that YouTube channel. I've done that too. And I didn't start my YouTube channel until I was in my 40s. I'm still in my 40s, but you get the point. Somebody wants to hear what you have to say. We all have a unique opportunity simply because we are here and breathing. I implore you, don't waste it. Madam C.J. Walker died at the age of 51. She was just getting started in business. I can only imagine what she would have accomplished if she had lived a little bit longer. That being said, take care of your health too. That is something that Walker did not do. And that's where you and I have an advantage. We're still breathing. You see, this thing called life, we only get one shot at it. Don't you know that graveyards are filled with people who didn't do the thing, who didn't live out their purpose because it was too hard? Life is hard. It's hard being poor and not having enough of what you need. It's also hard working your butt off, taking a risk, doing something that's fulfilling, and seeing it pay off for you and your loved ones. Which hard are you going to choose this year? It was hard for Annie Malone and Madam Walker, having people tell them you can't do this because you're Black, you can't do that because you're a woman. And a lot of the opposition that they faced was from Black people, especially Black men. But look at what they did in 1910. You don't have those obstacles in your way. We tend to do a good job at paying our bills and existing. That's not living. This year, take the dance class, take the vacation, take the break that you need to regroup and get back at it, but live. Don't exist. Now I'm going to leave you with this quote from Madam C.J. Walker. Then I'm going to plug a couple of my videos for you to watch because they are very, very good. And if you made it this far in the video, thank you. And let me know what you're going to do to live this year. You all know I like to read my comments and I like to reply to as many as I can. Madam C.J. Walker said, quote, "I had to make my own living and my own opportunity, but I made it. Don't sit down and wait for the opportunities to come. Get up and make them." End quote. If you just watched this video and felt something stirring inside of you about starting your own YouTube channel, or maybe you already have one, but you know that it could be doing better, I want to talk to you for a moment. Are you a content creator who feels like you're doing all the right things, but your channel still isn't growing the way you want it to? Are you making content, but not making money? Or maybe you're a business owner who knows you need to be on YouTube, but you have no idea where to start? If that's you, I'd love to help. I have a membership called Hot Mess University where I teach creators how to actually build sustainable income on YouTube. Not just views, not just subscribers, but real revenue. The link is in the description box. And if you're serious, like serious, and you want to work with me one-on-one, send me an email. My email address is also in the description box. I work with content creators, and I'm also very interested in working with businesses who are ready to use YouTube strategically. Now let me tell you what's possible when you actually implement what I teach. You heard me mention my friend and YouTube colleague Keisha Irvin earlier in this video. Her channel is Color Me Pink. When she first talked to me about her channel in 2022, She was making $2,500 a month on YouTube, and that's a really good side hustle income. We worked together at the end of January, and her very next check, February, was a little over $7,000. And here's the key: she implemented 90% of what I told her right away. She didn't sit on it, she did the work. And now, Keisha consistently earns between $9,000 to $12,000 on YouTube every single month. I actually interviewed her about her journey in my membership, and I uploaded that interview to my YouTube tips channel. I'll leave a link to that interview on the end screen so you can hear it straight from her and see her actual earnings. She opened up everything in that interview. So if you're still breathing, and I know you are because you're watching, it's not too late to do your thing. And if YouTube is your thing, consider checking out Hot Mess University or email me so that we can see if we're a good fit for one-on-one work. I look forward to working with you, and I'll see you on the next video.
Annie Malone and Madame Walker were not the only women who married men below their station. So did Madeline Astor. After having been married to one of the richest men in the world, John Jacob Astor IV, who died on the Titanic, she reached way down into the deepest gutter and married a really hot-looking Italian boxer. He was never good in the ring, but he was pretty good at beating her. The results of that marriage were even worse than what Annie Malone suffered from her marriage to Aaron. I published a video about that saga that you can see here. I'll leave a link to it in the description box. My sources for this story are the Topeka Plain Dealer Archives 1914 and 1918, On Her Own Ground, The Life and Times of Madam C.J. Walker by Alelia Bundles, the California Eagle Archives 1923, the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Hartford Courant Archives 1932, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch Archives 1915, 1925, and 1927, the St. Louis Star and Times Archives 1925 and 1927, the St. Louis Globe Democrat Archives 1927, the St. Paul Echo Archives 1927, and the Black Dispatch Archives 1937.
Someone else lived her life during years that overlapped Alelia Walker's. And she, too, came into possession of a lot of money, though in a totally different way from Alelia. But she lost her fortune in the end, too. Peggy Hopkins Joyce, said to be the woman for whom the term gold digger was coined. I published a video about her that you can see here. I will also leave a link to that video in the description box. My sources for this video are All Night Party, The Women of Bohemian Greenwich Village in Harlem, 1913 through 1930 by Andrea Barnett, thoughtco.com, High on the Hog, A Culinary Journey from Africa to America by Jessica B. Harris, cruiselinehistory.com, Wrapped in Rainbows, The Life of Zora Neale Hurston by Valerie Boyd and Professor Catherine Clinton, Women's Health Magazine, The Real Alelia Walker is Much More Interesting Than the Myth by Alelia Bundles, The Secret Radicalism of Alelia Walker's Dinner Parties in Bon Appetit, The New York Age Archives 1919, San Bernardino County Sun Archives 1930, and the Yonkers Herald Archives 1931.